They say the best surprises come when you least expect them. I'd been planning the perfect surprise for months. Something that would change everything between my wife and me, prove that I'd been listening to her every complaint, every hint about the life she wanted. I had the confirmation email in my pocket, flowers in my truck, and 8 years of marriage that I thought was worth saving. But when I pulled into my driveway that Friday afternoon, ready to give Emma the surprise of her dreams, I found a silver Mercedes I'd never seen before, sitting where it didn't belong. Some surprises, I learned, cut both ways. And some discoveries change a man forever. What I found in my own bedroom that day didn't just end my marriage. It taught me that sometimes the only way to rebuild your life is to completely destroy someone else's first. My name is Ryan Carter, and I'm 35 years old. I build things, houses, communities, dreams. As a construction supervisor, I manage major housing developments across the county. When contractors need someone reliable to run their sites, they call me. I'm the guy who shows up at dawn, stays until the work is done, and makes sure every nail is hammered straight. I've been married to Emma for 8 years. We met at my buddy Jake's barbecue when I was 27 and she was 24, working retail at some department store downtown. She had this laugh, God, that laugh, that made me feel like I was the funniest man who ever lived. When she threw her head back and genuinely cracked up at my stupid jokes about construction mishaps, I knew I was done for. We married fast. Maybe too fast, but it felt right at the time. We moved into a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. We talked about kids someday, the way married couples do, but somehow never quite pulled the trigger. There was always something. More stable finances, a bigger house, the right timing that never seemed to arrive. 3 years ago, Emma quit her retail job. She said she wanted to focus on our marriage, make our house a real home. I supported the decision without hesitation. My income as a supervisor was enough to carry us, and I liked the idea of her being happy instead of stressed by some middle manager who didn't appreciate what she brought to the table. But lately, happy seems like a word from a foreign language. For the past 2 months, Emma's been relentless about taking a vacation. We never do anything exciting. Ryan, she'd say, scrolling endlessly through Instagram photos of friends on tropical beaches, at all-inclusive resorts, living lives that looked nothing like our quiet suburban existence. My response was always the same. Money's tight, babe. Overtime's mandatory through the summer. Soon, though, she'd roll her eyes and mutter something about me loving concrete more than her, then go back to her phone. Always that damn phone. What Emma didn't know, what I was extremely careful to hide, was that I'd been squirreling away money for months. Every overtime check, every quarterly bonus, every extra dollar I could scrape together went into a separate savings account she didn't know existed. I was planning something big, a 10-day Caribbean cruise, one of those luxury packages she'd shown me a dozen times with that longing look in her green eyes. I'd been researching cruise lines, checking prices obsessively, watching for deals, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. Our 8th anniversary was coming up this Friday. I'd already decided. That's when I'd surprise her with the tickets. I could picture her face when I handed her that envelope, the shock melting into pure joy, maybe some happy tears. It would fix everything that had gone wrong between us. Prove I wasn't the workaholic she accused me of being. Show her I listened, that I cared about making her dreams come true. But Emma's complaints were getting sharper, more cutting. She'd started comparing our life to everyone else's. Sarah and Jake just went to the Bahamas for their anniversary. Why can't we ever go anywhere? She'd accuse me of being cheap, of prioritizing work over her, of not understanding what she needed from our marriage. I didn't argue. I just kept adding to that secret account, telling myself it would all be worth it when I saw her face light up. The irony was killing me. Every time she complained about money, every time she accused me of not caring about her happiness, I was literally building her dream vacation one overtime shift at a time. Soon, I kept thinking. Soon she'll understand everything. But Thursday night, something felt different. Emma barely spoke during dinner, just picked at the chicken I'd grilled, checking her phone constantly. When it buzzed with a message, she'd smile at the screen. Not a polite smile, but something genuine and warm that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. What's funny? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She looked up like she'd forgotten I was there. "Nothing you'd understand," she replied with a dismissive tone. The words hit harder than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as hard as she meant them to. I went to bed that night with excitement and dread warring in my chest. Tomorrow everything would change. I just had no idea how completely I was right. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made construction work almost pleasant. I was at the site by 6 a.m., supervising foundation work on a new development that would eventually house 40 families. The concrete trucks were already lined up, drivers drinking coffee and waiting for my signal to start pouring. My phone buzzed around 9:30. The email I'd been waiting for. Booking confirmed. 10-day Caribbean cruise for 2, departing Miami in 4 weeks. I read it 3 times, grinning like an absolute idiot while standing ankle-deep in mud. Jordan, my foreman, noticed my expression and walked over. "What's got you looking like you won the lottery, boss?" he asked with a curious smile. "Anniversary surprise for the wife," I answered, unable to keep the pride out of my voice. Jordan laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. "You're a good man, Carter. She's lucky to have you." I couldn't focus after that email arrived. My mind kept drifting to the presentation. Should I do it over dinner at Catalina's, that Italian place she loved but we rarely splurged on? Or maybe keep it casual, just pull the tickets out of an envelope at home like it was no big deal. The casual approach might be better. Emma hated when things felt too orchestrated. At lunch, I drove to the site office and printed the confirmation. The paper felt significant in my hands, proof of months of sacrifice, of overtime shifts when I was already exhausted, of skipped lunches and brown bag dinners, of putting every extra dollar toward making her happy instead of buying myself the new truck I actually needed. I folded the confirmation carefully into a white envelope and slid it into my jacket pocket, right over my heart. But there was something nagging at me, a thought I couldn't quite shake loose. Emma had been different lately. Not just complaining about vacations, but genuinely distant. She didn't ask about my day anymore. When I tried to kiss her goodbye in the mornings, she'd turn her head so it landed on her cheek instead of her lips. She was always on that phone now, always smiling at messages she never shared. Last week, I'd noticed she'd started wearing perfume around the house again. Not for me, because she'd already be wearing it when I got home from work. When was the last time she'd gotten dressed up for me? I couldn't remember. I pushed the thoughts away. I was being paranoid, reading too much into normal behavior. She was just bored, frustrated with our routine. The cruise would fix it. It had to. I left the site at 2 p.m., telling Jordan I had anniversary preparations to handle. First stop, the florist for a bouquet of deep red roses, her absolute favorite, though we hadn't bought flowers in probably 2 years. Then the liquor store for a bottle of Pinot Grigio, the expensive kind she liked but never asked for. The clerk at the liquor store asked if it was a special occasion. "Anniversary," I replied, and the word felt good in my mouth. 8 years. Not perfect, maybe, but we'd made it work. We'd built something together. As I drove through our neighborhood, I allowed myself to feel genuinely optimistic for the first time in months. Tonight, I'd remind Emma why we fell in love. I'd show her I'd been listening to every complaint, every hint, every Instagram post she'd sighed over. The cruise wasn't just a vacation, it was a reset button on our entire relationship. I turned onto our street, already imagining her face when she opened that envelope. And then my stomach dropped into my boots. There was a car in my driveway. A silver Mercedes C-Class, engine still warm from recent arrival, that I'd never seen before in my life. I parked 2 houses down, engine off, staring at that Mercedes like it might disappear if I concentrated hard enough. The house looked normal, blinds half closed like always, living room light on, Emma's car in its usual spot. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my chest, a tightening that had nothing to do with anniversary anticipation anymore. The flowers sat wilting on my passenger seat. The cruise confirmation felt like a joke in my pocket, and that Mercedes sat in my driveway like an accusation I wasn't ready to understand. I sat in my truck for a full minute, staring at that Mercedes and trying to construct innocent explanations. Maybe it was a friend's car. Emma had mentioned someone from her yoga class buying a new vehicle. Maybe there was some kind of emergency and she'd called someone for help. Maybe the neighbor's kid was visiting and parked in the wrong driveway, but the engine was warm. I could see heat waves rising from the hood. Whoever owned that car had arrived recently, maybe in the last hour, and Emma hadn't mentioned anyone coming over. She never mentioned anyone coming over anymore. I grabbed the flowers and wine, stepped out quietly, and walked toward my front door. My construction boots felt too loud on the concrete walkway. The front door was unlocked. It always was during the day in our neighborhood. I stepped inside and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. The house was silent, but wrong. Emma's sundress, the yellow one with tiny flowers that I'd complimented just this morning, was draped over the arm of the couch. Not folded, not hung up properly, just tossed there like an afterthought. Near the stairs, a man's dress shirt lay crumpled on the hardwood floor. Expensive looking. Not mine. Shoes kicked aside carelessly. One men's loafer near the coffee table, another by the entryway. A woman's sandal under the end table. The bouquet felt ridiculous in my hand now, the wine bottle heavy and pointless. I set them both on the kitchen counter with hands that weren't quite steady. Moving on autopilot while my brain tried to process what I was seeing, I walked to the base of the staircase and listened. At first, nothing. Then sounds. Soft at first, then unmistakable. Moaning. Rhythmic movement. The creak of our bed, my bed, the one I'd made payments on for 4 years. The mattress we'd picked out together at that furniture outlet after test laying on a dozen different models. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest, pushing out the panic and confusion, replacing it with a clarity I'd never experienced before. The kind of clarity that comes when everything you thought you knew about your life explodes in a single moment. I walked back to the entryway closet and pulled out my old aluminum baseball bat from college. The Louisville Slugger I hadn't touched in years. Then I took out my phone, opened the camera app, hit record, and propped it up on the hallway table facing the stairs. If this was what I thought it was, I wanted proof. I climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately. Each step was silent despite my size. 15 years of construction work had taught me how to move quietly when necessary. The sounds from the bedroom got louder as I climbed. Emma's voice, breathless and urgent, saying things I hadn't heard her say in months. Another voice, male, low and encouraging. I reached our bedroom door. It wasn't fully closed, just cracked enough that I could see through the gap. What I saw destroyed 8 years of my life in a single glance. Emma was on our bed, completely naked, on top of someone. A man I'd never seen before. Mid-30s, dark hair, expensive watch still strapped to his wrist. They were too lost in each other to notice me standing there, too absorbed in their betrayal to sense the end of the world happening 10 feet away. I didn't hesitate. I kicked the door open with enough force that it slammed against the wall. The room froze like a photograph. Emma screamed and scrambled to cover herself with our sheet, the sheet I'd washed last weekend. The man tried to grab something, anything, his face going white with terror. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then I spoke, my voice flat and cold as winter concrete. "Congratulations. You finally got your vacation," the man started stammering. "Listen, man, I didn't know she was married. I swear to God, I cut him off by swinging the bat into his ribs. The crack echoed through the room like a gunshot. Once. Twice. The man crumpled to the floor, wheezing and gasping, trying to crawl away from me. "Ryan, stop!" Emma screamed my name, begging. "Please, let me explain." But I couldn't hear her anymore. Everything had gone quiet except for the sound of the bat and the man's labored breathing. I grabbed them both by their arms, Emma fighting and clawing at me. The man too injured to resist, and dragged them toward the stairs. "Ryan, please!" she pleaded, crying now. "It's not what you think!" I was beyond words. I hauled them down the staircase, their naked bodies sliding and bumping on the carpet, and threw open the front door. Daylight flooded in. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Neighbors might be home from work early. Kids might be playing outside. I didn't care. I shoved both of them out onto the driveway, completely naked, exposed to the suburban afternoon sun. The man stumbled toward his Mercedes, clutching his ribs. I followed and smashed the passenger window with one clean swing. "You ever come near my house again?" I said, my voice still terrifyingly calm, "and I'll finish the job." The man didn't respond, just fumbled for his keys with shaking hands and drove away, leaving a trail of broken glass and blood on my driveway. I walked back inside, slammed the door, and locked every deadbolt. Emma was pounding on the door now, sobbing. "Ryan, please let me in!" she begged through the wood. "I can explain everything. It wasn't supposed to happen like this!" I walked to the kitchen, poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, something I almost never did, and sat at the table. The envelope with the cruise tickets sat next to the wilted roses, still sealed. I stared at it for a long time, then picked up my phone and watched the video I'd recorded. Emma's voice, saying another man's name. The stranger in my bed. My wife's betrayal, documented and undeniable. Outside, Emma's crying eventually turned to screaming, then to silence. I didn't move from that kitchen chair. I sat there all night, lights off, listening to her occasional attempts to get back inside, trying the back door, tapping on windows, calling my name through the walls. I didn't open the door, not once. At dawn, I finally stood up, made 3 copies of the video file, and got dressed in my best suit. I knew exactly where I was going. To a lawyer's office, to make sure Emma lost everything the same way I just had. I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. At 6 a.m., I walked out my front door into the gray morning light. Emma was gone. Probably walked to a friend's house or called someone to pick her up after I'd ignored her pleas all night. I didn't care where she went. She'd made her choice. I drove straight to the law office of Martin Reese, a divorce attorney my foreman Jordan had mentioned once during a conversation about a mutual friend's messy split. Reese had a reputation. Thorough, ruthless, and expensive. Perfect for what I needed. The receptionist tried to tell me Mr. Reese didn't take walk-ins, especially not at 6:30 in the morning. But something about my face, or maybe the way I was holding myself, made her reconsider. She made a quick phone call, spoke in hushed tones, then looked up at me with different eyes. "Mr. Reese will see you now," she said nervously. Martin Reese was 60, gray-haired and unshakable. His office walls were lined with law books and framed settlements. The kind of man who'd seen every possible way a marriage could implode. He gestured to a chair across from his massive oak desk. "I want to file for divorce," I said without preamble. "I have proof of adultery." Reese leaned back in his chair, studying me. "What kind of proof?" Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and played the video. No warning, no setup, just pressed play and let the evidence speak for itself. The footage was explicit and undeniable. Emma in our marital bed with a stranger, their voices clear and incriminating, followed by my violent response to catching them. Even Reese's practiced expression faltered as he watched. "Jesus Christ," he muttered when it ended. "You assaulted him." "He was in my house, in my bed with my wife," I replied coldly. "I'm claiming temporary insanity driven by the discovery of adultery." Reese rewound the video, watched it again, taking careful notes. "The violence complicates things legally, but the adultery, with video evidence this clear and graphic, you'll get everything. The house, all marital assets, no alimony payments. She'll have no grounds to contest anything. How fast can you make this happen?" I asked. 2 weeks to file all paperwork, 4 to 6 months to finalize if she doesn't fight it. With evidence like this, she won't fight it." "She can't," he answered confidently. "I wrote a retainer check that emptied half my checking account. Start today, I will." "But Ryan," he looked at me seriously. "This video, the assault, it could have criminal implications. You might want to prepare for—" "Let them come," I interrupted. "I'm not hiding from anything I did. That afternoon, I returned home to find my in-laws' Toyota Camry in my driveway." I sighed. I'd known this confrontation was inevitable. Emma's father, Dale, was standing on my porch, red-faced and furious. Her mother, Samantha, looked worried but defensive, the way mothers get when their children are in trouble. "You threw our daughter out into the street naked," Dale shouted the moment I stepped out of my truck. "What kind of man does something like that?" "You humiliated her in front of the whole neighborhood." I unlocked my door without responding and gestured for them to come inside. They followed, Dale still shouting about my unforgivable behavior. "She had to walk 4 blocks to a gas station to call for help," Samantha cried. "How could you do that to her?" "She's traumatized." I walked to my laptop, opened the video file, and pressed play without saying a word. The room went silent except for the sounds coming from my computer speakers. Samantha covered her mouth with both hands. Dale's face drained of all color, his anger transforming into something closer to nausea. They watched their daughter betray her marriage vows in graphic detail, heard her voice saying another man's name with passion she'd never shown me. When I dragged them naked down the stairs in the video, Samantha turned away completely. I stopped the video and closed the laptop. Now you know what kind of woman your daughter really is. Dale opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Samantha was crying harder now, but not for Emma's humiliation, for the disappointment, for the shame of raising someone capable of this. I'm filing for divorce, I continued, my voice steady and final. She gets nothing. Not the house, not the savings, not a dime of spousal support. The video ensures that if she comes near this property again, I'm calling the police for trespassing. But where is she supposed to go? Samantha asked weakly, her voice barely a whisper. That's not my problem anymore, I answered without emotion. She made her choice when she brought another man into my bed. She can live with the consequences. I showed them to the door. They left without another word. Dale's shoulders slumped in defeat, Samantha still crying silently. Emma wasn't with them. I wondered if they'd even picked her up or just come straight here to yell at me first. I didn't care enough to ask. Over the next 2 weeks, the legal machine moved with efficient brutality. The video was submitted as evidence. Emma's attorney, a public defender since she had no money for private counsel, advised her not to contest the divorce. The adultery was indefensible, captured in vivid detail. My assault on her lover, while legally questionable, was mitigated by the emotional distress defense and the fact that I'd caught them in my own home. The man Emma had been sleeping with, identified as Caleb Jennings, a car dealership manager from across town, never filed a police report. His own wife had discovered the affair through suspicious texts and was filing for divorce. He was too busy dealing with his own destruction to worry about pressing charges against me. Caleb ended up hospitalized with 2 broken ribs and a fractured hand from my bat. His marriage imploded completely, his wife taking primary custody of their 2 young children. He'd destroyed his family for a meaningless affair with my wife, and now he'd pay alimony and child support to support a life he'd blown up for nothing. Emma tried calling me once during those 2 weeks. I blocked her number immediately. She tried emailing. I set up a filter to send anything from her straight to trash. She showed up at the house one evening. I called the police for trespassing before she could even get out of her friend's car. She learned quickly. There would be no negotiation, no reconciliation, no second chances. I'd drawn a line and she'd crossed it. Now she'd live on the other side forever. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I kept everything, the house, the savings, the truck, even the cruise tickets I'd never used. Emma walked away with the clothes she'd managed to grab and whatever money she could scrape together from odd jobs. On the day the papers were signed, I received a text from an unknown number. Please, can we talk? I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, but I'm hurting too. Can't we try to move past this? I read it twice, then deleted it and blocked the number. Some mistakes don't deserve forgiveness. Some choices can't be undone. Emma had made her bed. Literally, now she could lie in it. Alone. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, my life had settled into a new rhythm. I still worked construction, still ran my crews, still showed up before dawn and stayed until the job was done. But something fundamental had changed in how people looked at me. Word had gotten around. Not through me, but through Emma's family, through neighbors who'd witnessed her naked ejection from our home, through the social media posts that Emma's former friends had made once they learned the whole truth. Small towns don't keep secrets well, especially ones this dramatic. People at work looked at me differently now. There was respect there, but also a kind of wariness. I was the man who'd caught his wife cheating and responded with absolute zero mercy and considerable violence. Some of the guys clapped me on the back. You did what needed doing. Boss, one of them said approvingly. She got what she deserved. Another added with a nod. Others kept their distance, uncomfortable with the brutality of how I'd handled it. I didn't care either way. I wasn't looking for approval or validation. I'd done what felt right in the moment, and I'd accept whatever consequences came with it. I sold the cruise tickets, Managed to get most of my money back since I'd bought the travel insurance. I used the refund to cover the final legal fees. The irony wasn't lost on me. The vacation I'd planned to save my marriage had ended up funding its destruction instead. The house felt different now. Empty, but not in a bad way. More like a space that had been cleared of poison. I'd thought about selling it, starting completely fresh somewhere else, but there was a stubbornness in me that refused. Emma had wanted to drive me out of my own home through betrayal and humiliation. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction by leaving voluntarily. Emma's situation, from what I heard through the neighborhood gossip network, was catastrophic. Her parents had refused to take her back permanently. Her father had apparently told her exactly what he thought of her behavior. "You disgraced yourself and our family," he'd reportedly said to her. "You destroyed a good marriage because you were bored. You made your bed, literally, now lie in it." She was staying with various friends temporarily, bouncing from couch to couch when people would have her. She'd gotten a job at a department store folding clothes for minimum wage, a significant step down from the comfortable life she'd thrown away. The car she'd been driving, the sedan I'd paid off 2 years earlier, had been in my name, so she'd lost that in the divorce settlement. She was taking the bus now, or walking, or relying on the charity of friends who were quickly growing tired of her drama. Her social circle had evaporated almost overnight. The friends who used to post photos of their brunches and shopping trips and girls' nights suddenly stopped tagging her in anything. Small-town gossip moves at the speed of light, and everyone knew the story. Emma Carter had cheated on her husband in their marital bed, and he'd thrown her out naked as punishment. Some people thought I'd gone too far. Most thought Emma had gotten exactly what she deserved. I heard these updates through Jordan, whose wife was connected to the neighborhood information network in ways that defied explanation. Jordan never asked if I wanted to know about Emma's downfall, but he told me anyway, probably thinking I needed to hear that she was suffering. "Heard Emma's having a rough time," he mentioned one day during lunch. "Living with different friends, working retail again." "Good," I replied simply, taking a bite of my sandwich. Maybe I did want to know. Maybe there was some satisfaction in learning that choices have consequences, even for people who think they're entitled to everything. 3 months after the divorce was final, Emma managed to get a message to me through a number I hadn't blocked yet. No apology, just raw desperation. "Please, can we talk?" "I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, but I'm hurting too. Can't we try to move past this? I miss what we had." I read it several times, thinking about how to respond. About telling her exactly what I thought of her attempt to frame this as mutual suffering, as if her pain from facing consequences was equivalent to my pain from being betrayed, as if her missing what we had could somehow undo the fact that she'd destroyed it. Instead, I deleted the message and blocked the number. There was nothing to say. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a choice. Probably dozens of choices over weeks or months of planning and executing an affair. Every time she'd texted that man, every time she'd invited him into our home, every time she'd lied to my face while scheduling her next betrayal. Those weren't mistakes. They were decisions. I focused on work instead. I took every overtime shift offered, threw myself into the job with renewed intensity. My site foreman noticed my dedication and recommended me for a promotion. Head foreman on a major new development, significant pay increase, more responsibility, 40-person crew. I interviewed and got the position easily. Life moved forward, whether I felt ready for it or not. The world didn't stop because my marriage had imploded. Projects needed completing, houses needed building, deadlines needed meeting. I walked past the closet where the baseball bat still sat, untouched since that awful day. I didn't feel regret when I saw it. I didn't feel guilt or shame or any desire to apologize for what I'd done. I felt closure. Some weapons are only needed once, but their presence serves as a permanent reminder of boundaries that won't be crossed again. The promotion came with a company truck and a substantial raise. I was making more money now than Emma and I had ever made together. I could afford the kind of vacations she'd always wanted, the kind of lifestyle she'd envied in other people. The difference was I had no desire to share it with someone who didn't deserve it. 6 months post-divorce, I was finally ready to admit something to myself. I was happier alone than I'd been married to someone who didn't respect me. The house was peaceful. My bank account was growing. My work was appreciated and well compensated. I could make decisions without consulting someone who would just criticize them anyway. For the first time in years, I was building something for myself. And this time, no one could destroy it but me. 6 months after the divorce, I was unrecognizable from the man who'd come home with flowers and cruise tickets that Friday afternoon. I'd been promoted to head site foreman, managing a team of 40 across multiple residential developments throughout the county. My income had increased by nearly 50%. I was respected, valued, rising through the company faster than anyone had expected. The house, our house, now just my house, had been completely renovated. New paint in every room, new furniture chosen by me alone, every trace of Emma systematically erased and replaced. I'd dated a few women casually, nothing serious. I was honest about not being ready for anything serious, and most women appreciated the transparency. Some stayed around for a while, some moved on quickly. I was fine either way. Physically, I was in the best shape of my life. I'd converted the guest bedroom into a home gym, worked out religiously before dawn every day, channeled everything into iron and discipline and control. The guys at work joked about my transformation. "You training for some kind of competition, boss?" one of them asked, laughing. "Just staying in shape," I replied with a shrug. I wasn't training for anything except the satisfaction of having complete dominion over my own life. Emma's life, meanwhile, had stagnated into permanent diminishment. She was still working retail, still riding the bus or walking everywhere, still living in temporary housing situations, friends' couches, short-term rentals she could barely afford, her parents' basement when they'd allow it, which wasn't often. She'd tried twice to move to different towns, start fresh somewhere else, but she couldn't afford it on her minimum wage salary, and she had no references for better employment. Her reputation followed her everywhere she went. Potential employers would Google her name and find the public divorce records, the documented adultery, the assault incident involving her lover. Landlords would see her lack of rental history and employment instability and choose other applicants. Dating was essentially impossible. Men either knew the story and avoided her entirely, or discovered it eventually and disappeared. She was 32 years old and living a life that felt like permanent punishment for a few months of selfish pleasure. Caleb Jennings, the car dealership manager she'd destroyed her marriage for, had fared equally poorly. His wife had divorced him, taken primary custody of their 2 children, and secured substantial alimony and child support payments. His ribs had healed badly from my bat. He walked with a slight permanent limp now. He'd been demoted at the dealership after his affair became public knowledge and workplace gossip. He and Emma hadn't spoken since that day. They were just collateral damage in each other's stories now. 2 people who'd briefly intersected to destroy multiple lives. Through Jordan's wife, I occasionally heard updates about Emma's continued struggles. She'd asked about me once, apparently, if I was seeing anyone, if I seemed happy, if I ever mentioned her. "Tell her I'm doing great," I told Jordan when he relayed this. "Tell her I don't think about her at all. People still ask sometimes if I regretted how harshly I'd handled the situation. If throwing her out naked had been excessive, if the violence was unnecessary, if I should have tried to work things out like a mature adult, my answer never changed. She didn't just cheat. She disrespected our entire marriage while I was planning to make her happy. She chose that path. I just made sure she understood the cost of her choices. I didn't feel triumphant about Emma's ongoing suffering. I didn't think about her deliberately or take pleasure in her struggles. Most days, I didn't think about her at all. But when I did, there was no regret. Only the quiet satisfaction of knowing I hadn't compromised my dignity or self-respect for someone who had neither. The baseball bat still sat in the closet. A reminder not of violence, but of boundaries. Of the exact moment I had decided my self-respect was non-negotiable and my marriage wasn't worth saving at any cost. I hadn't needed the bat since that day, and I was confident I never would again. As I sat in my renovated living room on a quiet Sunday evening, drinking good whiskey and watching a game on the new television I'd bought without consulting anyone, I reflected on the path that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been planning a surprise cruise for a woman who was betraying me in my own bed. Now I was planning a solo fishing trip to Alaska, something I'd always wanted to do but never could because Emma hated the outdoors. The difference was simple. I'd stopped trying to make someone else happy and started focusing on my own life. I'd stopped accepting disrespect and started demanding the treatment I deserved. I'd stopped being a victim and started being a man who knew his worth. Emma had given me an unexpected gift when she brought that stranger into our bed. She'd shown me exactly who she was, and she'd forced me to decide who I wanted to be in response. I'd chosen strength over weakness, justice over forgiveness, self-respect over reconciliation. I didn't destroy Emma's life. She did that herself when she chose immediate gratification over long-term commitment, when she chose a stranger over her husband, when she chose betrayal over honesty. I just refused to let her destroy mine in the process. That wasn't revenge. That was survival. And sometimes, survival requires a baseball bat and the willingness to use it. I didn't destroy her life, I said aloud to my empty, peaceful house. She did that herself. I just refused to let her destroy mine, too. That's not revenge. That's survival. The words echoed in the silence, true and final. Some lessons only need to be learned once, but their echoes last forever. Emma had taught me that trust, once broken, can never be repaired. I'd taught her that actions have consequences, and some consequences last a lifetime. We were both excellent students,